Michael Small here, happy as always to be able to discuss the important things with you, our viewers, but of course to actually have the practical discussion while we await for my co-host. I am joined by one of the originators of Talking Point. We are, of course, speaking about former Minister of Finance and attorney at law, legal scholar extraordinaire. She has taught almost every attorney that has been on the network in some form or another. That, of course, is Mrs. Karen Shishera. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Sean, and good morning to your viewers. And that is true. It's more a function of my having taught for too many years, it seems. But yes, what you said is true. And of course, seen many of them rise to very senior positions of judges and gone far beyond. Either taught or have been at law school when I was there. Oh, I think so, yes. Well, good morning to your viewers.
Well, I mean, it is not such a beautiful morning this morning, which was interesting. I got quite accustomed to it being nice and sunny despite, you know, the dark rhetorical clouds hanging over the country. One of the issues that we do not always necessarily speak to you about, Karen, is with regards to the levels of crime that we're facing right now and violent crime. You know, I mean, yes, we have spoken to you about it, but you and I, you know, when you're on the show, we tend to speak more about the larger political issues and economic issues. But with regards to the ongoing crime, do you have, I mean, I myself am finding it it's changed. It feels different, and it's making me uncomfortable. Do you have any similar thoughts?
Well, I think one of the things that you had brought up, and it was in the papers, it was actually, I read it after, the leaking of some report, which showed that there were about 12,000 guns in the country. That alone is very frightening. But also I think it's the mindset of the criminal of today. It's a different, they're prepared to die young. They see no value in your life and they see no value in their life. And that's a very frightening thing. And the other worrying thing about it is that they don't seem to have some sort of grand reason or some motivating factor. You know, like back in the days, they might have said it was the Black Power movement or whatever we want, whatever, or whether it's socialism or some ism, schism, something that united people against this grand, you know, idea that they made them feel noble in what they were doing. I don't think there's any of that going on. And that is very frightening. So I do. I went back and looked actually at the statistics for crime, because CSO does carry statistical data with regard to crime. And in fact, you can go way back to 1962, you'd be surprised. And when the average murder rate, but then the population was half what it was about 92, 68, around that. And in fact, where you really saw a big uptick was actually after 1990. That, surprisingly, that when I say a big uptick from an average of 80-something murders a year to going into the hundreds, and then it just kept climbing. But also at the same time, the population almost doubled around that time.
Right.
That was also an important factor we have to bear in mind, because when we were seeing the numbers at 68, the population was about 700,000. And we have seen, they said there was a huge increase in the population around that time. So, you know, I guess when they do the 100,000 thing, I don't know if it makes that difference, but you definitely saw the difference, not so much in the 80s based on the data that I looked at, but it was based on after the 90s. You just saw it just going up and certainly getting into the 400s. By the time we entered into the 2000s, we were definitely looking at an average of 400 and something. That seemed to be the norm after that.
I mean, I guess, you know, there's some truth to the song, Bring Back the Old Time Days. But one of the other issues that you've been monitoring, as we just have a little bit of time left before the first break, LNG seems to be being pushed even further. The price of oil actually is just under $100 a barrel, but LNG prices are steadily rising. Right now, there is hope that the energy crisis might get a little bit of relief, both because American exports might be exceeding their targets that Biden promised, as well as the fact that demand in Southeast Asia might be reducing just a little bit. However, of course, Russia is doing whatever it can to exert whatever leverage it can with regards to Europe and their energy demands. Winter's coming up, so the expectation is the demand will shoot up in order to try to provide heat during the winter months. So for TNT, you are hoping that we could continue to be a big player on the LNG markets?
But that's the thing, you know, we had that discussion, and of course we just spent a little time on it. It's just one of those things that I get interested in. But this is of importance to Trinidad because we are a big LNG player. We know Train 1 was shut down, but we do have 2, 3, and 4. And LNG has become even more important because, you know, when they talk about the price of oil and gas, especially gas, they talk about the geopolitical uncertainty, not only other factors, and that is really playing a big part because I don't know, I follow those things out of just my own personal interest, but it affects us. It does affect us. And Russia recently shut down its supply to Finland, Latvia, another 2 or 3 other small European countries shut down their supply, and all of this gas is pipeline. And of course, Germany is their biggest buyer. But they also keep on saying there are all kinds of problems, but it really has to do with the price of the rubles, because I think Russia is insisting that if you do not put back up the price of rubles, because they're trying to put pressure on Russia, we're not going to supply you with gas. So I think more than anything else, the gas line, pipeline supply of gas to Europe from Russia, which is a major purchaser of natural gas and needed, especially as they go into winter. What is happening now, countries are turning more and more, while they try to get these new green energy sources, to LNG. And why LNG? Because LNG is transported by specially crafted ships. And therefore, but you need specially crafted platforms. And it takes time to build, and it takes money to build. And so in that sense, we are ahead of the game because a lot of countries are now turning to LNG to supply them with the natural gas because of all these pipeline issues with Russia. And we just so happen to have Train 2, 3, and 4, and we have the platforms and the ships, so that we are in a very strong position, whilst LNG prices are definitely going up. So for Trinidad and Tobago, the current geopolitical issues going on with Russia and Europe, with the gas line transportation of natural gas, is benefiting us insofar as our LNG, which is an important part of our energy sector.
Yes, I think LNG prices might have doubled what they were last year. If not, the increase might be even greater than that. So it makes things hopeful for us in the short term, at least in some respects. It's interesting. Going into COVID, foreign exchange was one of the biggest issues for a lot of businesses because we basically imported most of what we consume. So those businesses relied on imports to have things to sell. Now, I don't necessarily hear too much of an issue with foreign exchange. I don't know if it's just because it got buried underneath a lot of the other problems that we're facing. So, or if just because there are bigger issues with the economy, so the need for foreign exchange is not quite the same. It might be just as bad, but in a different way.
I think the reason for that is that anything that we buy, and we see Sri Lanka, we see other countries, Lebanon and other countries, suffering because they don't have foreign exchange to buy food or to buy the fertilizers to produce their own food. What happened to us in Trinidad is that because the price of oil and gas went up significantly, our foreign exchange reserves have also gone up, because when we sell our oil and gas, it's sold at US dollars. So the pressure that we were under with the foreign exchange reserves has been eased tremendously with the huge increases in oil and gas, which is traded with the US dollar. So that is where the pressure is eased up. I don't think it's because demand necessarily, well, because after COVID-19, yes, I think demand domestically would have been reduced, but I think more so the foreign exchange reserves have gotten a big fillip because of the oil and gas prices, and that's why Heritage could even give us a substantial profit, and even Paria, which supplies the imported fuel to other islands, other Caribbean islands, and they have also declared a profit, even though they are importing the fuel.
Well, I mean, it just goes to show if you have a business that's having problems with accessing foreign exchange, I think that is something that we would like to hear. But let's stick a pin on that. We have something more recent to get into. I want to get Karen's opinion. I have a couple of clips with regards to some of the messaging around emancipation. But we'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll get into those ministers' messages. When we return, Sean Michael Small, Karen Shishera. This is Talking Point on WESN, your content capital.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
The best birthday gifts are at dbesttoys.com. Shop for the best brands you love at the best prices. Like VTech, Leapfrog, Fisher-Price, Play-Doh, Hot Wheels, Barbie, Cocomelon, LOL, Baby Alive, Crayola. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 32DBEST to order. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
We delve into the exciting world of neurology.
The brain's an electrical organ. If the brain doesn't get enough blood with food and oxygen to it, it's not able to supply the electricity to the rest of the body. If that happens for a prolonged period enough time where the brain stops getting blood, part of the brain dies. Essentially, that's a stroke.
Hey guys, so I'm getting a little nostalgic here, sitting on the blocks at the pool. Today we're going to talk a little bit about swimming. What's up, Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN Content Capital.
There's a taste in the air everywhere. rich and creamy, you'll find it right here. Makes you smile, relax a while, it's fun and good cheer. Ooh, enjoy every scoop. Ooh, every taste will get you hooked. We have flavors that you love, a combination special. Come along, enjoy our treats. This is Uncle Pete's.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered,
the conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andre.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Talking Points. And of course, as you can see on your screen, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Keaton Shaw. But this is a full day. We're not just joined by Keaton, we're also joined by another surprise guest. But Keaton, I'll let you introduce him.
Well, good morning, folks. Thank you very much, John. Just to let you guys know, there is a truck that is shut down on Caldwell Street, and it's causing a major backup onto Ryson Road. So please be careful this morning, especially considering the weather. Anyway, I have been given the privilege, the honor of introducing our next guest, according to Sean Michael Small. He is, of course, Mr. Blanchishes, Mr. Trinidad and Tobago, and Mr. Many Things, more so Mr. TNT, Mr. Louis Leasing, as alongside us.
Good morning, good people. Wherever you might be at this moment, I hope you recognize that you have a responsibility to do what you must to stabilize this democracy.
Well, speaking about stabilizing the democracy, let's just get into it. We don't have much time. We have a clip from the emancipation message of Minister Hines. Of course, we don't have the whole message, but there was A small part that we wanted to highlight for you, the viewer, and for our esteemed panel to give their opinion on. So let's hear what the minister had to say.
Fitzgerald Hines had a message?
Yes, he did. Hold on, it's coming.
That's a new thing.
We in the cabinet recognize, and I'm telling you flatly, that for some reason or reasons, perhaps nothing wrong, perhaps nothing corrupt, but the bulk of applications we got for the grant of state land for sometimes residential but most times agricultural pursuits, we did not see African people among the enthusiasts in that regard. We have taken action as a government, as a cabinet, to ensure that when we deal with these applications, we see equity and we see balance, and that is happening now.
So, I mean, the key thing there, and this is something that I find it's very, very tricky, because the minister is basically saying we have seen an imbalance of applicants. And I find it very strange with regards to what is it he's trying to imply, because usually when a system has any sort of systemic bias or bigotry, it's not at the applicant stage that you're going to see the problem. You're going to see the problem at the results. You're going to see that the results might not reflect who applies. But the applicant stage, to some extent, you know, don't you have to first ask why it is that way? Because it's up to the people to apply.
I didn't get into the nitty-gritty of that. There were two aspects of this which I thought of. There are two angles that you can try and analyze this from. One is he's basically advocating for state-sponsored segregation. That is to the extreme. You can look at it that way. The other aspect of it is that he's recognizing that there may be an imbalance for whatever reason. As he said, maybe not bad, maybe not political, whatever it may be, and we are going to try to do our best to try and correct that imbalance, whether it be through education or other programs. So there are two angles that you can look at it at. The thing is, as you said it many times before, Kemil said, yesterday I've said it, I do not think the minister really thought this through before coming out and making such a speech, because he really mucked up on his communication.
Well, that's why I said what I said. Applicants is not really the indicator for any sort of injustice. It would be the result, you know. I don't know, Mrs. Nunez Teixeira, if you have, if you want to weigh in.
Because Mr. Woodbrook seems engrossed in something else. What I actually had seen was another clip featuring Mr. Fitzgerald Hines, the minister. And I see it as a continuum, maybe because I was in politics and you want to send a message out, so you have your message being repeated in different ways by different people, but still being sent out. I saw that as part of the recognition, that is my view, that there are a lot of criticism has been made of this government in terms of helping young Afro-Trinidadians, and it seems as though they bear the burden of being the cockroaches, and they're the ones that seem to be the ones involved in crime based on what you see on the television, on the videos, as well as what is in the prison, etc., etc., etc. So I think because the PNM as a party is recognizing that it is losing a lot of its young base because of that perception, they are deflecting responsibility and at the same time trying to say they're going to do something. So I linked what Fitzgerald Hines, minister, said about trying to increase the number of Afro-Trinidad. That's what he meant, owning land. But it's not our fault. It's not our fault. They're not applying. And then linked it to what the Prime Minister talked about, the rampant level of violence. But it's not our fault. It's not our fault. It's because they don't have families.
Yes.
It's not our fault. Then you link all of those various speeches. And another one that Fitzgerald Hines had given, Minister, to another group which I got, where he talked a lot about the lack of family and the lack of men and the lack of men. It's not our fault. It's not our fault. What the message I get, and they are saying, and I was there in government, so I think I could sort of get a sense of sitting around cabinet or sitting down in a little group and saying, how do we deal with this? Well, what we're going to do is message. And the message is going to be, it's not our fault. And then after we get that message out, it's not our fault, we're going to now say, look at what we're going to do to help you. Because they recognize that they're losing their base. And the base of young Afro-Trinidadians who are disenchanted with what the government has done to help them to become entrepreneurs. That is my take on that.
Well, Louis, before we bring in our next guest, I do want to just hear your initial thoughts. With everything that we've had to say, Mr. Woodbrook is deep in thought, and usually when he's so deep in thought, he has a lot to say. Hopefully we will have enough time for it.
Let me say first of all that for the first time at last, I could support Fitzgerald Hines. We bury our heads in the sand on the issue of the imbalances in this society, and we do so at grave risk. If we do not, as it were, seek as a government to ensure there is equity in this society, we may well find ourselves in a Rwanda with the Hutus and the Tutsis. This is a reality because the pot has been boiling hot and the water in the pot is extremely hot at this time, where the races are squaring off. Very much as the gangs are squaring off with the police, the races are squaring off. I make no bones about it, but I truly believe that we have taken this thing about equity in this society and paid it only lip service. But at the same time as Fitzgerald Hines is saying that, I would expect him to come forward and speak that the government is going to fully charge up with the financial and other resources, the Equal Opportunities Commission, that the government will do what is necessary to ensure that the freedom of information business is treated with seriousness, because all these institutions lend itself to an equal and just society. But lest we lose sight of the point Fitzgerald Hines is making, he is saying, we're going to give out land. But the only applications that have come in the main is from one side of the society. And we believe that the other side of the society should be given, as it were, an opportunity to be involved in the process. Now let me finish, please. People may argue, well, they were given a chance, but they're just not interested, and that is also true. I remember when I was the chairman of the Small Business Development Company. This is in the first Manning incarnation. I was given a chairmanship, chairman of the Small Business Company. And I had the brilliant minds of the following people working with me. Michael Toney was the deputy chairman. Deborah Peake, senior counsel Deborah Peake, was on the board. Dr. Derek Brown, who is now with the World Bank. And the list goes on and on. But we took a position that our work was not sitting down in a boardroom and pronouncing over the accounts and all of that. We needed to do more. And we began an outreach program. And I always say that these people who I served with are in fact patriots. Because senior counsel Deborah Peake didn't have to do it. But we went in school halls and community centers all over the country, whether it was Faizabad or Port of Spain, to talk about small business, to talk about the home being economic space and so on and so forth. And she brought her husband, Mr. Paul Peake. So that I'm saying to you, as I look back on that period, I know the PNM of that period did its work. In the context of what is now happening, first of all, this is not being critical of African people. But I don't know how many African people would have seen the advertisement. And if they did see it, I don't know how many would have said, Well, I think I know Sean Small have an interest, or Sean Small should have an interest. Let me call young Sean Small and say, Sean, there's an ad in the papers where the government is distributing land for agriculture. I think you should apply. The weaknesses on the African side of the society are so grave. It tells you that the likes of Fitzgerald Hines or Dr. Keith Rowley and others, the work that they have done, or they perceive they have done, has been one big failure. That's the point I'm making.
Well, yes, I was just about to say, I have a question to ask, but I want to save that for the general panel with Karen, with Sean, with Louis, and the next guest I'm about to welcome. So let's take a break here on the program, because, my word, from the monologues and from the dialogue, I have a lot going through my mind. So we'll return after this.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered.
The conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN Content Capital.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix-It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix-It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate
a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion.
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking Point. And as promised, we have added to the panel, we have the man himself, Mr. Steve Alvarez, who had a very specific message with regards to the emancipation holiday, as it were. Now, we just were talking about part of Fitzgerald Hines' messaging and the government's messaging with regards to emancipation. We had some different views, although there were similarities even when there were differences. But now we welcome Mr. Alvarez to the show so that he could weigh in on this important topic here today. Good morning, Mr. Alvarez.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. And I know we have limited time, so I'll get to the point really quickly. One of the things that I noticed coming from Fitzgerald Hines and from especially the PNM administration, and in his speech he talked about equity. And I keep making the point that there is no equity when you deal with emancipation and deal with African issues. Mainly because the African man comes from a different history. He came from a history of oppression and a history where he did not have much choices. So if you have to deal with this equity, you have to be strategic. So let me give you an example. In 1948, the government of Trinidad and Tobago recognized that the sugarcane workers were not perhaps treated equitably in society. So by law, by statute, they created the Sugar Authority, the Sugar Industry Welfare Committee, SILWIC. And they specifically said to them that you are to distribute housing for the first time and repairs, that you have to give them money to do that. That you had to that you have the authority to give them, to first-time homeowners, house and land. They allow these sugarcane workers $20,000 for a lot of land, and they are only supposed to pay $1,000 a year. And they had a legal department to ensure that in the end of that year, as soon as they pay their thing, they have a deed in their hand. That is a strategic intervention. It went on further to say that apart from that, you are to formulate financial aid and any form of assistance. Now, this is not just a matter of somebody speaking off a platform. This is by law. A statutory authority was created to deal with this inequity in our society. So when you come out and talk about I care and I care and I care, unless you take that step to strategically put into law certain positions, and these were very specific. This is from the Gazette. So if you don't put specific things in place to deal with the inequity that you talk about, then it's just lip service. And I am very disappointed when I see people get up and they dance up the place with some African thing, and then the next day, you're back to facing the same issues. So anybody in the African society can tell you that there's difficulty in accessing finance when you go to for the bank. Now tell me something. When you give a people housing and you tell them, oh, you have to pay $10 or $15 a month rent, but they have no deed that they can take to the bank. You tell them, I'm giving you a job, a CPAP or URP job, but they have no job letter that they can take to the bank. What you're doing is that you're just giving them temporary window dressing. And until you deal with this specifically, Louis made the point a while ago that if you don't deal with these things, you're going to end up in a situation where the pot, if I have to use this exact word, that is boiling is going to overflow. Because you have to deal with these issues.
Well, I mean, those examples you say there, it's social help, but it's not actually changing anything. It's temporary, and it's in a way it's reoccurring, because if you have a generation renting, and if you have a generation on CPEP or URP, and they can't get a job letter and they don't have a deed, and you need those documentations now with the new license, when they switch from permits to license, you have to have a bill with your name on it and all of these things. So they're wanting, the government and all is wanting you to have more concrete documentation of your life, of your assets, of what you have, to prove yourself, to show your place in society.
But it's shameful. It's shameful that when you had the Fifth Summit of the Americas, how do you deal with the people of the Beatum? You put up a little wall with some boom and some flowers. You close down the Beatum estate, the Beatum dump for a few days, and you make it look like. And this is something that people should think about. So you make it look like you really care. So that means, first of all, that you are aware. You are aware of what you're dealing with. The fact that you could put a wall and put some flowers and make it look nice, it means that you are aware that it's not looking nice. The fact that you can close down the dump for a week means that you are aware that this is something wrong, that you shouldn't have human beings living next to this, all this terrible fumes and so on that come from the dump. You are aware. And as soon as the Summit of the Americas goes, you're back to normal. That's an insult to a whole population.
But I was going to say, all of these things that they've tried to do seems to be temporary stopgaps.
Exactly.
That's reoccurring expenditure that's on the budget every year. Is it that? But you're saying we need something substantial,
that's
something
why
that will
I brought up Silwick.
make a change.
Silwick was created by law. It's not a matter. You don't have an option today or tomorrow to say, well, what happens with the sugar workers? It was created by law. It's a statutory authority.
Well, so since you were the last person to speak, my question is for everybody, for Karen, for Louis, but we'll start with you. This term, or the terms equality and equity, in your opinion, has it become so politicized, or the approach to creating an equal society has become so politicized that by using such terms now, as we would have seen, could be deemed or could create the perception of a racial divide rather than actually trying to truly envision and implement what they mean?
That's exactly the point I'm making, is that they are aware, the politicians are aware when they make these dog whistles, these speeches, they are aware that there's racial inequality.
Gentlemen,
yeah,
I think one of the challenges this society has is that it has never truly been able to understand itself. We had our best opportunity to do that with the fellow Williams, Eric Williams. And I dare say, as I look back on that period to now, he failed. We had a next opportunity with a fellow called Basdeo Pandey. He too failed. There was a fellow called Patrick Manning. And every time I see what is going on today, and I reflect what went on under the Mustard Party under Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, I know that Patrick Manning was the most successful of them all. Because in a sense, he really tried to put in programs, not only to treat with the individual races, but to bring them together. People may ask me, what? And I could go through a whole lecture on that. What concerns me, however, is that I think the way we're trying to put together this nation at 60, we are using a model that has not worked. You see all this, if my brother Alvarez said that these holidays, he sees them as political mama guy, he's correct. We've got the whole thing about the holidays in the country, whether we want to accept it or not, sets a tone for the society. There's simply too many Christian holidays. And this thing about having an Indian arrival day, it should be arrival day other than the first people. All of we arrive here, Chinese, Indian, African, Tooth Moon. We all arrive there. It shouldn't be no Indian arrival day. It should be arrival day as there is Independence Day and Republic Day. Now, Independence Day and Republic Day are intended to suggest to all races and all peoples and all residents on this little piece of rock that, listen, today is the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Today is the independence, when this society got its independence. But we focus more on, and you see the advertisements. You see corporate Trinidad. Well, it might be to have more Indian people who have business in the country. But when there's Diwali and Eid and things, you see much more advertisements than when there's Republic Day and independence. And that tells you something about the society. I feel that we should have a rethink about the holidays that we have in this country. When you think that the Catholics, and I am a Catholic, mind you, they have Christmas, Boxing Day, Easter, Monday, they have Good Friday, Corpus Christi, and the list goes on. I'm saying let us call in the Catholics and say, listen, we know that you all contributed significantly, but you all have too many darn holidays in this society. Let's rework that. And we've got to start to sit down, and maybe this is what we should be doing at 60 years. Let us begin the reconstruction process of this society. You see, people don't understand, but everything you do in a society impacts the whole. Holidays have a tremendous influence on the thought processes of people.
Let me just come across to Karen now. Karen, you know, a full panel in-house, so forgive us, you know, but your thoughts and opinions on this entire situation, because...
So, yeah,
go on.
I'll just give it, hopefully put it on point. I'll go first with the point that Louis made. I think you have to put things in context. The way that Trinidad and Tobago developed is we came as a Christian society. The population was, in terms of numbers, at the time when those holidays were instituted, were far more non-Indian, non-East Indian. And it is over time and evolution of time that instead of taking away, they added. So yes, I agree there needs for reconstruction. Secondly, you also made the point, and I do agree with what you're saying, in terms of we have to develop our own developmental model. We are not America, we are not Europe. We are a little bit of a piece of rock, two pieces of rock that came out of essentially slavery and indentureship. So by the time we became independent, which is only not even about 60 years, we cannot compare ourselves with Europe, which has been independent and had their civilization development hundreds of years, and so has America, so has Canada, with a homogeneous population. We're different, we need to develop our own model. It's time that we do that and make it relevant to us. To deal with Steve Alvarez's example, which I wasn't aware of, that particular legislation, what I will say is that when I was part of the cabinet, Mr. Manning, as the Prime Minister, was very well aware of the same issues of creating inequity, and he actually mentioned, now I don't want to get the country wrong, so I'm kind of concerned about whether it was Ceylon that became Sri Lanka, but it was one of those countries that initially the indigenous population, when the British colonial masters brought in the East Indians to work in the cane fields because the indigenous population no longer wanted to do the work or whatever, they in fact soon became the majority rather than the minority, and they took over parliament, and they had racial unrest in the country, and they actually had to legislate. It got so bad that they had to legislate employment, legislate it reached to that point. And Mr. Manning would always say he didn't want Trinidad and Tobago to have to reach a point where we had to legislate. So what did he do? And you cannot underestimate the power. You see that education? You know how many persons are doctors today that if we kept to the, had not expanded the opportunities, the St. George's University, the opening up of that was not by chance. That was not by chance. The opportunities for law. I taught law for many years. I started off with teaching a class about 60. Now you know what's going on. They can't get in because a lot of them went to the private institutions that were gate sponsored. A lot of people became accountants because they went to the private institutions that were gate sponsored, and that was a deliberate measure that the then Prime Minister did in order not to have to legislate the equity by opening up opportunities for everyone who did not come in the first 20 or 30 in the CAPE exam, but who were very capable of doing very well. Because I, as a teacher, I saw for myself, certainly in law school, that many times the students, and also at CAPE, that many times the students who got the first class honors degree and came at the top of the class on the principal's list were not the ones that would have gotten in that way. So it was a lack of opportunity. So it is not true to say that the government did not try. What I'm saying is this leadership has failed and failed. I mean, it's embarrassing. But I can say that when Mr. Manning was there, he said it and he did it. He said it and he did it.
I'd like to add to what Karen said there. I think for a lot of people, you have to avoid the trap of looking at opportunity versus results. You can't look at results and say, oh, well, because the population is 40-40, you can't expect everything to be 40-40. That's just not how it's going to work, right? What you do is you look at the opportunity. Does every citizen have the same opportunity to become a doctor if they really want it to be, to become a lawyer if they really want to be? Because there are situations, not necessarily in race, but in Sweden, where they have legislation to ensure equal opportunity with regards to gender. The genders diverge with regards to their personal choice. Now, that goes on into a whole host of other sociological questions about why some demographics will choose things that other demographics won't, and we might need to try to fix something there. But I think what Karen said there, opportunity. We should always look towards the opportunities that are being provided to people and not try to shoehorn results, because then you get situations where perhaps people who are not qualified to be in positions end up in positions, and that could cause problems.
But before we go to the break, and I know when you go to the break, is hustle out people like Alvarez and also. But let me make a point here. My good friend Steve raised the issue about banks. I keep making the point. You see how Mayor Motley has locked horns with the banking community in Barbados. Where's Keith Rowley on that in this context? And that is because he don't have the problems that black people have. Let me make the point here. I remember when I sought to start Citadel Limited to produce 95, which the PNM uses as their mouthpiece these days. I went to every bank in this country. I went to Royal Bank, and fate would have it so strangely. 2 weeks ago, I was at a hotel in Florida, and I met the fellow whom I had discussions with. And I asked him, I say, you still lending money? He said, well, he in Belize. I say, you're lending money? I want to come and borrow some money. But I said that tongue in cheek, because when I went to Royal Bank, they wanted my cuticles, both on my fingers and my toes. And I said, no, you wouldn't have that. But I will show you something. I will start this business, and I will send you the accounts for these first 6 months to illustrate to you how darn stupid you are in not lending me that money. Well, let me finish make the point.
Well, we have to break for news.
No, let me finish make the point, please. and I want us to end on this note.
Well, we're not going to end. We're not going to end.
I want us to end this segment on this note so that the listeners and the viewers would hear it. Black people in this country, and when I say black, I do not mean people who look like Keaton Shah. Keaton Shah is not a black person in this society, sadly as it is. In the States you will find out, and in London you will find out you're black. But in Trinidad, black people are treated like dogs in the financial institutions in this country. They put the ceiling so high, you cannot reach it. It happened to me, and I don't feel like black. I know I'm black.
You sound like my mother.
But I am not black. I know I'm black. And I'm saying to you, that is what Keith Rowley and Imbert and Hines should be focusing on. And we may well find that if they focus on that, we will have less youngsters running through the tracks with RH-15s on their shoulders in Clifton Street.
Mr. Lee Singh, I have to cut you. I do apologize.
Louis, Penny Bank, Unit Trust.
No. Hold on. This is important. But you want to understand how stupid this administration is?
They take a transformational vehicle like the cooperative credit union movement and put it in the hands of Foster Cummins.
Listen, folks, we have to break for
that
news
is
on
where
the hour.
That is where cooperative credit unions
we have
are.
news.
We have news, not so on.
I think the time, I want to say to you all, I took a time away from here and I have come back for war.
Coming back, news on the hour, a little late, but...
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Sinclair. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Man shot and killed in second attempt on his life. Man drowns saving 11-year-old. Tobago Carnival budget to be announced on Monday. And internationally, Nigerian man killed in full view of passers-by in Italy. Now for the details. One man is dead following a shooting in St. Augustine on Tuesday. Reports say Shoin Julian was shot and killed near Gate Boys Bar in UE by two gunmen. This was not the first attempt on the life of Julian, who was shot along with another man on March 10th in Caroni. At that time, the shooting, a car pulled alongside the group and fired several shots, hitting the two men. A man described as a Good Samaritan is dead after risking his life to save an 11-year-old from drowning over the holiday weekend. According to a news report, Otis Morrison drowned after rescuing an 11-year-old from a mishap at sea on Emancipation Day. Reports said the Point 14 father was at Guapo Beach on Monday when the girl fell off a jet ski and called out for help. Without hesitation, Morrison of Salic Trace Gonzalez rushed to save the child. But while saving her, Morrison reportedly got into difficulties. Other swimmers pulled him out of the water and tried to resuscitate him, but he was unresponsive. He was taken to the nearby Point 14 hospital where he was pronounced dead on arrival. Interim President of the Tobago Promoters Committee, Erlen Clark, says there is yet to be a set budget to the Tobago Carnival expected to take place in October. He said, however, the THA Chief Secretary has revealed that by next Monday, an expanded budget for the event would be announced.
The Chief Secretary, the Honorable Fali Augustine, would have indicated that, he think that the budget's supposed to be expanded. So they went back into talks with stakeholders and other persons involved in planning the Tobago Carnival to revisit the budget and so on. And on Monday coming, definitely some form of information in regards to the budget would be out.
In international news now, police have arrested an Italian man in connection to the killing of a Nigerian street vendor whose brutal beating death on a busy beach town thoroughfare was filmed by onlookers without any apparent attempt to intervene physically. Video footage of the attack has circulated widely on Italian news websites and social media, eliciting outrage as Italy enters a parliamentary election campaign in which the right-wing coalition has already made immigration an issue. Well, that was your news to the hour on WESN. I am Denise Sinclair. Thanks for watching.
The Mary Immaculate Prayer Group and Friends presents its prayer breakfast on August 31st in aid of Monsignor Christian Pereira. The prayer breakfast begins from 9 a.m. at the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception. Cost is only $200. Come support the Cup of Gratitude in aid of Monsignor Pereira, August 31st.
Tickets are available at the Parish Office of the Cathedral of Immaculate Conception and the Parish of Our Lady of Perpetual Help.
Well, Welcome back to Talking Point. So, news of the hour is now out of the way. Thank you very much to Denise St. Clair for that, keeping us up to date with the latest. But back to the conversation here now on the station, and it ended in such a powerful note. And, you know, off air, Mr. Alvarez was making mention that even for documents, when you are invitation to tender, invitation to bid, it's so expensive, the average man cannot afford to purchase it. Do you think, in your opinion, sir, that the system is deliberately, it has already been designed, but do you think it's been deliberately maintained this way to create the notion of dependency? And by creating that notion of dependency, you need us more than anything else.
Well, it's not so much a system of dependency that was in terms of contracts. Contracts in government are usually their way of giving back to the financiers. So this is so the financiers invest in the election campaign, and I have given you back. So that's, I give you a perfect example. The Muruga project, because I am from Muruga, and there's the Muruga Port Development. So I had visions of my company getting involved because you have a vested interest in the development of Muruga, and I can see Muruga people participating in that. So when I looked at the tender for that project, it was somewhere above $10,000 for the documents. So right away, I am not going to take $10,000 because $10,000 for a small business is a lot of money. So the average small business is like, I can't tender. And pretty soon I came across, I actually went down to the project, and it's all enclosed, and the nobody from the Grand Chimay and Bastia and Laloon and those surrounding districts employed in the project. So they have to peep over the fence if they want to know what's happening for Muruga. And that's how this country is. When people come to Mamagai people about we care about the black man and we care about you, the people, they don't. They care about the financiers, and it is strategically done to ensure that you remain dependent on your CPEP and your RP project, because that way I can get you to fill up a bus and go here and fill up a bus to go there. But if it is that you are independent and you now have to make a decision, do I want to do this or not? So then you must not have that choice. When I say come, you must come. When I say go, you must go, and I will keep you there. And that is the point.
But then that is the complete opposite of emancipation and liberation.
Exactly, that is why I made the point.
But he must add that isn't only for the ketchup party, you know. That is for the mustard party too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not as you're seeing it being played out now. I think that for too long, people associated the subsidies and so on, the CPEP and URP with the African thing. That is the association. So no one is saying that the other party does not do it, but it is really insulting, I think, to young black Trinidadians, and I think they're waking up every party, whether you are PNM, which I am still, but your leadership I don't agree with, just like how many Republicans don't agree with Trump. Just as how Alvarez's party, everybody's preaching the same message to the young black youth. Understand that you are being used, and that man at the top does not care about you. And what they're doing is by keeping you dependent on that little money that they're paying you by subsidies, and make you not only ready to go in the buses, but to get involved in the informal sector when they're getting paid much more than the money that they pay you in URP and CPEP. And that is a system that I believe that they've put in place, and they come and say the right things at the right time. But right now, I think people are fed up of what is going on in the country.
Is the message the same for the young Indo youth, or the young?
No. Make no bones about it. If you have never been to a UNC meeting, I want to recommend that you invite yourself into one of those meetings. And you will understand that when you go to these Monday night forums or what have you, everybody in that meeting is a reasonably independent person. They bring themselves, you see cars, all kinds of big cars from miles away, and they come prepared to listen and to make their contributions if they are so allowed. But I want to make the point here. This thing that is happening in Trinidad
particularly with the PNM, at 60 years is a good thing. And if the young people in the PNM, and there are many bright, talented, driven young men in the PNM and young women, if they rally together and take the party away from the old people, and I include myself as part of the old people, but I'm not of the PNM, so I still stand a chance to work somewhere else. But if they rally and take, you want to call it hijack it from Rowley and Marlene McDonald and Foster Cummins. Foster Cummins must go. He cannot be a symbol for young African minds in this country. Are we all telling them that you have to be a smart man to get by? I am saying no. The time has come when this country must draw the line. If you want to be a smart man, understand we have Golden Grove for you.
But let me just make this point with regards to the Yellow Party. When the Yellow Party is in power, you would see a lot of small contractors. People, I can see villages in Barrackpore and along Rochelle Douglas Road. There was a transformation during that 5-year period of shacks to houses. There was a little church that used to be a little galvanized around that is now a big church. All those things happened because they...
Tracks to roads.
Yes, because what they did is to ensure there were families given contracts to do box drains. There were contracts all over South. And that was their way of saying, listen, you don't have to find $10,000 to buy contract documents. You can get a government contract once you have the most basic of documentation in place. And that's when and I'll give you an example. I spoke earlier about Silwick and so on. In Silwick, at the end of 20 years, it's $20,000 a year for your lot. But at the end of that, some people were paying for the lots in 2 years. At the end of that, you have a deed. You have a situation where a man can go to a bank and say, listen, I know you already want to give me loan and so on, but I have a deed here that's worth $100,000 and I want a $10,000 or $20,000 loan to open my tire shop. The same thing is not afforded to the African man who's on Duncan Street and living in a house that he's paying $7 a rent. What does he go to the bank with? I have no deed. I don't have a job letter. And then you want to know, so what does he do? There's a sense of hopelessness.
No, but Steve, I want you to stick up in. Africans in the oppressed communities do get contracts, but you must be wired to the underworld.
And that's correct.
So whether Heinz could talk as much as he wishes, Rowley can speak as much as he wishes. The PNM has driven, as it were, this business of government relationships with the underworld.
Well, I want to pause there because you spoke of young African symbols. Or symbols to African youth. And there was a direct response to Mr. Alvarez's comments by the Minister of Public Utilities, Marvin Gonzalez.
Yes, so on AM Prime yesterday, our colleague, Mr. Andy Johnson, he took an opportunity as Minister Gonzalez was speaking about, well, some of the challenges of the African community to ask him about what Mr. Alvarez had to say with regards to his emancipation message. So we have a short edited clip of that just to get the basic points of Minister Gonzalez's response. Let's take a listen to that.
Steve Alvarez, he put out this statement yesterday. I don't know if you get some of his correspondence, in which he was bemoaning the fact that we're celebrating or we're observing emancipation. He was saying when you look at the society, the people who are in evidence in predominant numbers as not doing well are Afro-Trinidadians and Tobagonians, well, in particularly Trinidadians.
You know, I don't think I necessarily agree with that, because if one decides to focus on one aspect of life in Trinidad and Tobago, they can easily come to that conclusion. But there are so many good and positive things happening in our Black communities all across Trinidad and Tobago. And so I don't think that I necessarily agree with Steve Alvarez on that. And perhaps as he focuses on that aspect of our reality, that there are other aspects of the reality, of our own reality, that he should focus on before coming to that conclusion. That is not to deny that we have our challenges as Black people, you know, and in our families, etc. So we have examples of Black people doing very well across the board, and we just have to ensure that a lot of our young people who, for one reason or the other, are finding it difficult to find themselves, you know, self-sustainable jobs because of lack of education. And these problems have been with us for a very, very long time, since our independence. They're not unique to Trinidad and Tobago. As a matter of fact, they're all over the world. So we have to stop beating up on ourselves to give the impression, you know, to give people the impression that our problems are unique. Certainly they are not unique. We are part of the world.
So the minister there gave his response. One thing that stood out to me is he mentioned a lack of education in a country that's supposed to have and at the very least had before economic problems, free education for at least a decade up to the tertiary level.
For all.
So for all, right? With multiple campuses, not just UE St. Augustine, but also in Port of Spain, right? So that's multiple campuses in North Trinidad alone, as well as in South Trinidad, for all. So the lack of education, I have to ask, you know, is there any merit with regards to that? I understand that the results might show some merit, but the government made education available to all.
What results show some merit? I spent a lot of years living in on the top of St. Paul's Street and in Upper Wharton Street, Laventille. And I can tell you, when I was 17, 18, 19, or whatever ages I was at in my youth, you can walk from the tanks in Laventille to the bottom of St. Paul Street, and the only thing you had to fear were dogs. So you want to tell me that the results have shown that now you cannot walk. I went up because I wanted to contribute something back to St. Martin's Welfare Association, which is on top of the hill where I lived. When I got up there, so first of all, as I reached up there, the police came right after because they want to know if there's a madman driving up this hill. And when I got up there are bullet holes on the planning buildings. And so how do you talk about since independence when you have allowed a society to deteriorate to the level that it is? I used to go and buy corn soup and so on and listen to Desperados on top of the hill.
Well,
so you have the most beautiful view.
But
Hold on. Let me add to that, because in a sense, I know the leasing family had its roots at 34 Clifton Street. You remember, you see in the news all the time they talk about Clifton Towers. I know about that. 34 Clifton Street.
Yeah, I know that street well.
The woman I married and is the mother of the only children I have came from 26 Clifton Street.
I didn't go far.
I want to say to you this. The leasings have, people may know Louis Leasing, because I have been in people's mind share all the time. But the leasings have contributed significantly. The first Auditor General of Trinidad and Tobago was Matthew Leasing, my eldest uncle. Clifton Street. Now, when I reflect on that, because I used to go and look for my grandparents, they had the sweetest cherries on a tree there, and so on and so forth. I knew what love was in that community. If you go in Clifton Street in the night or in the day and they don't recognize you, if you go up there, you will look like a Venezuelan and you will die. Alvarez go up there, he would look like a smart man. They'll shake him down, tax him for going up there. When I campaigned in the local government campaign, that 26, that building, the 6-story building that is in the news, the gangsters were in control of the ground floor. So visualize you coming to work, you're going out to work in the morning, you're meeting the gangster when you're leaving your home. You're coming in the evening, there's the first thing you're meeting.
So Louis, can I just interject to what you're saying, because I want to follow through with what both of you are saying. So what's the difference? What has happened? Obviously, it's drugs, and who is bringing in the drugs, and that's why you have the gangs. That's why you have the unlicensed guns. But every time you read in the papers, they're only showing you the young black man, the symptoms of the problem, not the cause of the problem. And I noted that when the Prime Minister, every time the Prime Minister speaks, I've never heard him address the issue of drugs. I have never heard him address the issue of drugs that are plaguing those societies. I've never heard him. He talks about mother and father, because he's a mother and father situation, so he could talk that talk, and it appeals to middle class people. But he will never say that the real problem that is driving the crime and the unlicensed gun is the presence of drugs in those communities.
And hold on, and low-level contracts. Low-level contracts.
Yeah, but they're all connected. It's all connected.
Yes, yes.
Well, let me take
it.
But I just want to put in an important point here, because in a sense, I know, I understand why we are in the predicament we're in. Lloyd Bess, who was not only a mentor to me, but was my good friend, always reminded me, do not rehearse center stage. In other words, when you sat down behind the chair at the desk, you can't be guessing. This government must admit it does not know, and it does not know that it does not know. This government must admit it has been rehearsing center stage for the past 7 years.
But then does the people know? Or do the people realize that
this government is realizing it? The people are realizing it.
Let me ask you this.
We all gave them the benefit of the doubt. We didn't want, nobody wants a government to fail if you are a patriot. Karen didn't want them to fail. Steve didn't want them to fail. I didn't want them to fail.
I do think, though, that I now have a question with regards to the motivation of our society. Because we saw it even in first world countries where salary relief for the pandemic, when it was continued beyond the point that it might have been necessary, it incentivized people not to go back out into the workforce. And there's always the questions of social programs, CPEP and URP. Well, if I can get this money doing this, why am I going to go and get a formal job? We see it in Tobago. Everybody wants to work in the THA or for the government because most of them not necessarily really working, right? So could it be that because of our politics, because these things are popular with the voting base, could it be that it caused our population now to get accustomed and to want and desire for the easy money? And depending on when those opportunities from the government dry up, well, the next step is crime, because that's the obvious next set of easy money.
Essentially, subventions, has subventions created, I go back to the word dependency, or that sense of entitlement.
Yes, but entitlement and dependency are strategic moves by groups to deal with a group of people. In the United States of America, for example, when you guys are young, so you all would not know of the 70s in the United States with people like Barry Gordy and the United Negro College Fund and Howard University and all these things. So black people were progressive. They were independent of government and so on. And there was a strategic intervention to build buildings and to put them on welfare and give them homes and all that stuff.
Yes.
Just so that you could put them where you want, and then they fill the ghettos with drugs. This is not old talk. These are facts. So when you see welfare, like in Trinidad and Tobago, being given, things are handed to you, it is strategic. It's to ensure that I have a base of people who can answer to me.
And will vote for me.
Yes. And I have to keep you at a certain level, because an independent man is a dangerous man.
I think Booker T. Washington, not the wrestler, but the activist from 1920, he said it best. There's a group of activists who don't actually have any desire to solve your problems. They want you to keep having problems so they could keep being in the business of being activists, advocating for you.
So then my question is, because I think this might be our final question as well, is simply, where is the line between social help and social policy versus that politicking that you have mentioned?
That's what I'm saying. When you have social help, it must be like Silwick. It must be strategic. It must be entrenched in law. It must not be at the whims and fancy of the politician. It must be, yes.
Publicized, advertised, promoted.
Exactly.
Like how I told you, I started to tell you about the small business effort. When we went out, it was to tell everybody, all man Jack, and I want to share this with you. When we went to Shogunas,
it didn't have standing room. People were looking through the aluminum louvers to see what was going on. When we went Lavantil, it had 26 people. So you ask yourself what was going on. This is not a new problem. Let me also say there's a big missing link that we don't talk about in this country. The successful blacks in this country.
Yeah.
And there are many successful blacks.
Mm-hmm.
They are not moved to assist black people in need in this country. Make no bones about it. You go, all them lawyers, them black lawyers in this country who making big bucks, and all them black doctors who making big bucks. You go and really investigate and see if they ever truly did anything meaningful, whether they send a young black person to become a medical student, help them pay the bills, whether they send somebody on a scholarship. Black people are their own worst enemies.
But I think also, so you can't just simplify it like that. I think that secondly, I think a lot of black families, so middle class families, tend not to advertise the success of their families. You don't tend to hear everybody knowing how well their families are. And thirdly, a lot of them migrate to the States. A lot of them do not come back home. There are many educated black people who, if you were to count them, who have not returned home. And that is because they do not have those kind of cultural, religious ties
Karen, please. Let me say to you, if you know the history of the Syrian community, the early ones when they came, whoever followed, when they landed, they will give them a suitcase with materials, and they will give them a room to stay and some starting money. Let us look at that in Trinidad. How many Africans who are successful are prepared to give those in need a start in this country?
And that has to go back to your mainly African-based political party who has been doing very little. Because this is one of the things. They feel, listen, if I vote PNM, if I vote for people looking like me, I will have something, I will get something back. And that's what they believe in.
But I'm sure, Louis, I'm sure you help people. Louis, I'm sure you help people. Steve, I'm sure you help people. I do. I have them, but you don't talk about it.
I'm merely saying to you, Karen, it's not a question of talking about it. I'm saying to you, in this society, we require an extra effort to pull black people up by their boots. Well, and if I were the political leader of a PNM party, I would say to people in this country, African people, I am speaking to you on this occasion. We are in a crisis. We require each one of you who have done well to do well by someone in need at this time. But you have to have moral authority to say that kind of thing.
I'd just like to close to say the proof is the fact that all of those that leave TNT and go abroad, they find success way out of proportion to the opportunities.
And they stay,
The opportunities here.
And that goes back to what we said last week, where there's a massive exodus of young people, a brain drain taking place in TNT. It has been for some time. It's just going to get worse. Folks, that's where we have to end it. Karen, Eunice, Shara, thank you very much once more. My good friend, it's good to see you, and thank you for joining us.
And I had a great time today. It was really educational, and I wish you could have back Steve another time, because I certainly learned a lot from him. Not to say Mr. Porter's play, Mr. Woodbrook, etc. Did not do that.
Mr. Alvarez is always welcome to the show. Not so sure about Mr. Woodbrook. He'll just call in. Mr. Alvarez, thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you guys for having me.
And Mr. Everyone, Mr. TNT, a pleasure once more seeing you, sir.
It was a joy being here this morning, as always.
Wonderful, sir. Sean?
What is instructive is that it's an Indian man having the last word.
Sean, you want to have the last word?
It's almost like if he set you up here.
You want the white man's
I am half Chinese with the name small in TNT, right? Okay, just remember.
Anyway, folks. Sorry, I have to have the last word.
You do?
Yeah.
Nah, today's a day to have a good day.
He can't even say my line properly. Today's a good day to have a good day. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.